Sure, so I guess you start at the beginning of what is money, right? Why do we even have money? All that currency represents is an easier way to facilitate exchange of goods and services, right? Before money, we would have to barter and we'd have to say, hey, can I have the eggs from your chicken and I'll come mow your lawn in exchange, right? And you'd have to individually find an exchange value, and what if I don't want the thing you're offering? So currency exists to be this constant mediating point.
Hey everybody, this episode is brought to you by the Freeman team at Spire Financial. Spire Financial is a national leader specializing in VA loans serving our veteran community. Contact the Freeman team at Spire Financial today and learn how to get your VA loan offer accepted through our Spire Key approval. This episode is packed with insane value, topics that I am super passionate about, entrepreneurship and Bitcoin. Our next guest brings a 30-year perspective of entrepreneurship to the table. He is the founder of Lift Creek Capital and a subject matter expert on cryptocurrency and blockchain. Sit back and enjoy.
Stand by, coming to David in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and cue David.
Super excited about today's episode because it's something I'm passionate about and curious to learn more of. Entrepreneurship and Bitcoin, this whole crypto world that you can no longer ignore. But before we get into that, I just have to know, because the first time we met, your mindset just knocked me off my chair, because not only do you talk about this freedom of life and entrepreneurship, you also live it. But when did you first get bit by the entrepreneur bug?
Man, I was really young. Would you believe 13 years old?
That is pretty young.
Yeah, it started with baseball cards in the 80s. And my best friend and I started out selling baseball cards on a little fold-up table outside of a strip mall. And
I get it.
His parents totally encouraged it. They would take us out there every Saturday, and we'd set up our table and we'd sell, and then we started going to shows.
Did your family support this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my dad's an entrepreneur, and we can talk about that, but that's where I get it from. But we got encouraged super young to do it, and we spent most of high school running an actual brick and mortar baseball card shop after school.
Really?
Selling cards to the kids. We expanded into comics. I mean, yeah, so.
Interesting.
I've just always been into doing my own thing and earning and selling and all of that.
You know, I can relate, because in high school, I don't know where you grew up, but in Phoenix, where I grew up, you have the numbers of the address painted on the curb. My buddy and I went to Home Depot, bought some stencils. We'd go door to door, spray painting the address on the curb for like $5.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, though, right? Like, you're a kid and you want some money, and especially before you're old enough to have a real job, you got to hustle. I mean, it's almost like entrepreneurship is baked in when we're young, and then society takes it out of us.
So, interesting. So that was going to be, I was going to ask that later on, but so what do you think it is about some people that really, truly progress and go down that entrepreneurship path and some don't? Is it many different things, from just where they are, circumstance, life, ambition?
I think it's two things. One, it's a desire for freedom. It's a desire for self-expression. It's also a little bit anarchist. It's a little bit disdain for rules, structure, and systems, and not wanting to be boxed in by what other people tell you.
So the people that pursue it then, and the people that maybe think like you think but don't pursue it, do you think it's a lack of knowledge, lack of resources, fear?
Fear's a big thing. Right? I think it takes courage to be an entrepreneur.
It does.
It takes courage to not do what everybody else is doing, to say there's a different or better way to do something, to be out on your own and be responsible for your outcome.
And it's hard too. I mean, it's not easy to start a business and grow it and sell it, build up a customer base, scale it if that's your goal, and run it. I mean, that's not easy.
It's not easy, but neither is most jobs, right? I mean, most jobs, to get good at them, is not easy.
Yeah.
But for most people, when you go to a traditional job, you have the comfort of a system and a process and a mentor and a team, and maybe less responsibility for the outcome or less perception of responsibility for the outcome. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, you are assuming personal responsibility for everything.
What lessons did you learn running a baseball card shop, comic shop in high school? What business lessons?
So, I mean, at the very fundamental, you learn about margin. You learn about
I was going to say.
How do you buy something and how do you sell it, and how do you create enough difference to profit on that?
Interesting.
But you also learn customer service. I mean, selling baseball cards to kids in the neighborhood is really about selling joy to these kids. I mean, my customers were middle schoolers and high schoolers, right? They were buying a card of their favorite player. They wanted that thing. It had personal connection. So there was definitely a big service component to it as well. But the other big lesson we learned was that business lost money the whole time.
How so? Margins weren't there?
No, I mean, we covered the buy and sell of inventory, but his parents were eating a loss on the lease of the location.
Call that a lesson learned.
They were taking a tax write-off so that we could learn about how to run a business.
I wrote a blog on this actually, believe it or not, on the site, and it was about, at least nowadays, and you'll hear a bunch of people say it, but it's cool to be an entrepreneur. It's a buzzword. It's cool to be an entrepreneur, but the fundamentals of being an entrepreneur or a businessman, or woman, running a business, of tracking those metrics, the numbers, actually running it at a profit, understanding what it costs, the cost to go out and acquire a customer, the cost that you get your product from, and putting all that together in an ecosystem that at the end of the day, throws a profit, because if you don't throw a profit, I mean, you're just not in business. I'm not saying it's all about profits, but if you don't have that number at the bottom, at the end of the day, it's pretty black and white. You're not in business anymore.
No, I mean, it might be PC to say it's not all about numbers, it's not all about profit, but that's what a business exists for.
Thank you.
It exists for profit. If you can do good while you're making profit, all the better, but it is not a charity. That's a different operation, right?
Right.
That's something else. And at the end of the day, you do have to learn how to be profitable.
Right.
And a lot of people, it is hip right now, right, to say, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, especially I'm a digital nomad, or, nobody wants a job now, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. But
Yeah.
There's a range of what does that mean?
I've had this same topic too, because actually we did an entrepreneur episode in season 1, and we were talking about the various types of entrepreneur. The example I always use is I've had the same pest control guy. He actually just sold, but for the longest time, excuse me, I had the same pest control guy, Marine Corps veteran, and sure, he ran his own business, and that's an entrepreneur. He made a profit, put food on the table, but at the same time, he was stuck in his business every single day running it. Mm-hmm. And then that's one style of entrepreneur. Then you have maybe these other entrepreneurs that scale a company, the Elon Musks of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. Those are two separate ends of the spectrum of entrepreneur. And I was always saying it's kind of maybe a personal choice or what kind of lifestyle you want to live that might lead you down that path.
Well, I think what it is so when you think about a lot of people who do start their own business that's in a service-oriented thing, electricians, plumbers, construction companies, whatever it is, a lot of times they're started by somebody who developed a skill, and they say, well, I want to be my own boss, so they start a company, but they don't have a background in building a business.
Well, that's what they know is that skill.
Right, they just know the skill. And so that limits them in their ability to scale to the size they need to be, what is necessary.
Size they need to be, or is that a desire what they want to be? How big of a company they want to have? No,
I think that the problem is you don't have a real business until that business can function without your presence.
Otherwise, you just created a job for yourself?
You just created a job, right. And that's different, because how do you sell that company if that company relies on you to be there, unless you're going to keep working in it for somebody else? It's not transferable. Not really in what it is. So you need to grow it, and you need to develop people around you that make you not irrelevant, but not necessary for day-to-day function. Once you achieve that, then you have a real enterprise.
Well, and we were talking right off camera where you said, and I'm going to totally mess all this up, but something along the lines of, stay small and profitable, and that's fine, or go big, but you kind of where companies kind of get stuck or die is right in that middle space where maybe they haven't really defined what they want to be.
Sure, but even defining what is small and what is big is important, right? So you can think on a bigger scale, there's this idea, I got to make this huge company, raise all this money, right, become a unicorn. But if you listen to some other entrepreneurs, they'll say, no, what's better is a really profitable $20 million company is better than a $200 million company a lot of the time. Because what it takes to make that growth isn't worth it. You may give up more of the company. You may net out less by being that bigger company.
And what about maybe the stress and lifestyle that comes with that? Is that a factor?
Absolutely.
Because it can't be, I've never done it, but it cannot be easy to build, start, grow, scale a $200 million company. Nothing's easy, but to get to that level, you're now playing clearly on a national scale, and that's a lifestyle. I also think that as an entrepreneur, you got to choose if you want that.
Absolutely. And I don't play in that realm, right? Like I don't know what it is to grow a $200 million company, but even for me, there's the distinction between things that I could do by myself and how profitable could I be doing something solo versus building out a team of, say, 10 people. And do I want that? Because when you have 10 people who work for you, you now have the responsibility of the livelihood of 10 people.
My very first company, I had 12, at our peak, we had 12 employees. More nut of a payroll every month than I want to admit. I had no earthly clue what I was doing, and that was my eye-opening kind of entrance into the entrepreneur space. And that actually led me, and I go back to lifestyle, led me like, I don't want this, I'm working 55-hour-a-week lifestyle. I want to go the smaller route where I'm profitable, we have a very healthy business, but I'm on that smaller scale.
Yeah, I've fallen into that trap myself. I've had a business with 12 employees on payroll, and they were all getting paid every month, and I was working 70 hours a week and not drawing a paycheck because there's nothing left for me after I paid them. Right?
So how'd you go from baseball cards to your first, I don't want to say real business because that was a real business, but how'd you go from baseball cards to the first business you opened, and what was that business?
Well, so after baseball cards was college, and it was interesting because my senior year in college, I was in an entrepreneurship class, and the professor told me, he said, I give you 3 years working for somebody else before you're on your own because you're not meant to be an employee. Well, it took me 7 years to get on my own. And what I did was I was fortunate that I met a woman who ended up becoming my wife, but I invested in her. She was a genius programmer. And I said, okay, you're going to build a business to get me out of my job. I will pay everything. I will go to work and I will pay all the bills till you build up this other business.
So she started working on a concept that you were kind of funding and just keeping the lights on while with your job.
Yeah. So she started a web hosting company. This was before Amazon Web Services existed. She built up a web hosting company. We ultimately sold that to a company in Canada, and then we started a company called Cake Central. And this was before Facebook and Pinterest, and it was a website about cake decorating.
Interesting.
And at its peak, we were getting 30 million visitors a month to our website.
Did you have a revenue model behind it? Or
Yeah. We were running digital advertising, and we were making great money, just the two of us.
Wow. Would you go out and be the business side and get the ads and the sponsors? Yeah,
absolutely. So I ran all the monetization for it, and she ran all the creative content, and she also built all the technology that ran it.
Interesting.
And but ultimately, Facebook groups and Pinterest came along and ate up 90% of our traffic. So, we couldn't have foreseen that. We should have sold, at the peak, but because it was such a passion project, our exit point was much higher than we had achieved, before that happened. But that was the transition that, investing in her, identifying her talent, and investing in that gave me the pathway out of employment and into.
When you were on the cake thing, did you do that were you off your day job? You did that full time?
Yeah. Once we sold the web hosting company, that's when I left. And then we were just, for the rest of my life, I've never had an employer since then.
From each job, each business, have you picked up a couple golden nuggets of lessons that have carried with you to this day?
Oh, it's constant.
Yeah.
So, the biggest thing is, as an entrepreneur, and people differ on this. Some people say you should just go all in on one thing. What has saved me over time is having more than one business always. And what that has allowed to happen is if something has happened to the primary business or something happens in the economy, I'm able to pivot resources and scale into the second business quickly and not be without income.
What systems do you put in place? You have to put systems in place so each of the businesses under you can function, right? Or is your time just spread so thin over multiple businesses?
Yeah, no, it's scaled in priority, right? And it's changed over time. When I was younger and I didn't have a kid and, I could just go 70 hours a week, I could put myself a lot into one or two or three businesses.
Right.
Now I have to put 80% of my time into one and be exposed into other businesses that only need the other 20% of my work time.
Well, that's my problem right now. I'm 80% in 2 or 3 different businesses. I gotta figure out with a quickness how to change that.
You do, and it's all about prioritization, right? For me, the big lesson that I learned through failure is that the one thing that you have a limit on is time. And so you have to prioritize because there's a cost benefit to everything. If I decide to give my time to this,
so true.
I don't have that time available for the other opportunity. And I found myself trapped giving too much of my time to the wrong thing and not been able to scale quickly enough because that thing that was eating up all my time was not going to be the primary revenue driver.
What was your biggest business failure?
I mean, I guess that changes, right? So on what you define as failure. So like in Cake Central, which I described, there was the failure that we didn't exit when we should have. That was a huge...
So did the company just go to zero and you shut it down?
No, it's still running. It's still running. It's making some income, but it's making a fraction of what it was and where we thought it was going. Because on the trajectory it was on, before Pinterest, and Facebook groups, we were holding out for a $20 million exit.
Oh, wow.
Whereas we could have probably got out at 5. And instead now, we probably couldn't sell it for $200K. So that's a huge miss, right? And then, the big mistake we made in that company.
Did that eat you up at all for the first, I'm sure you're over it now, but for the first while after that, did that kind of get to you?
No.
No?
I think one of the things about being an entrepreneur that is what makes entrepreneurs different is we never stop trying, we never stop believing, we never quit.
True entrepreneurs.
True entrepreneurs. One of the first things I learned back when I was younger was that most millionaires go bankrupt before they become millionaires. Now, I've never gone bankrupt, but that always reminded me that just because you fail in your first try doesn't mean you're not cut out for it, doesn't mean you won't succeed on the next one.
You just have to keep trying.
Right. You just have to learn and forget.
And I'm still on the hunt. I ask a lot of people this question. It's one of the questions in life is what really makes that person an entrepreneur to drive like that, because I could sit here and tell you stories all day long about how broke I was and bringing my first son into the world and being dead broke. I mean, that's scary. And most people would probably just say, okay, I'm going to go get a job or fold in the towel. And I could not fold in the towel. I couldn't do it. Just kept trying.
I can't do it because I can't get what I want in life to me, going and getting a job for what I want is giving up. Like I've lost my purpose, right? Like for me, I live life every day with a purpose. I act with intention and I'm committed.
So was this years of your upbringing that led you to that? I mean, because not everybody has this mindset. Was there anything in your childhood? Do you think people just have different personalities and that's just your personality, or why do you think like that?
I mean, some of it's individual personality, but also, I was fortunate to grow up in a very stable home with amazing parents. We didn't come from anything. It was paycheck to paycheck. Like I remember my mom writing checks at the grocery store on Friday, knowing the bank wouldn't clear it till Monday, and floating that, day or two of difference. My dad dropped out of high school.
Interesting.
My parents got married at 18. My dad entered the Marines during Vietnam. My dad's family was terrible. Like they put me and our dog in the back of a car when I was 15 months old and drove all the way across the country so I wouldn't grow up near his family. My dad had to get his GED. They moved to Washington State and they did the maintenance at an apartment so that they could get a discount on rent so that they could live. Neither of my parents are college educated, but my dad is an entrepreneur. And
so that helps a little bit. So fast forward a little bit. So after the cake thing, what was the next business?
So really the next thing after the cake thing was the advertising technology company. And that was born out of learning how to monetize Cake Central.
Interesting.
So we had developed the technology and the systems in order to do that effectively. And just in conversations with other publishers, they would say, hey, how are you guys doing this? I'd tell them, and they'd be like, man, could you do that for me?
Advertising, can you give me an example when you say advertising technology?
Sure. So when you're on any popular website and you see those annoying banner ads, maybe it's a ad following you around from Amazon or wherever, those banner ads get there through a technology stack, right?
Okay.
And so we developed a technology stack that connects to the supply, demand, or the demand. We are the supply, right? They connect to all the major exchanges, get the bids, bring in the best paying ads onto a website. And that's the reason the internet is free, is because you will look at ads while you...
And then you would service clients through this technology. You would go out and get clients that have existing websites and then bring your technology to them.
Right, yeah. So you go out and you find other websites like Cake Central, right? Like that have a good audience, that are not big enough to have their own ad technology department, but they're big enough that they can make an income, and we help them do that.
So you've been in the digital space then for a very long time.
I built the first website by a student at my college.
What do you mean by a student?
Well, so when I was in college, you still dialed in through AOL to get on the internet, and you used the Netscape browser. Nobody knew how to make a web page. Like, they didn't even teach it in computer science class at college. So
interesting.
I was, interested enough that when I got onto the internet, I wanted to know, how would you put up your own page? And so I went and found the HTML specification and figured out how to put up a web page.
Did you have to get the domain? Is it like today, go on GoDaddy, buy a domain? I mean, similar type?
Yeah, except that nobody, literally, I didn't know anybody who knew HTML or how to put up a web page.
So you really this is going to get into the second half of our conversation. You had a desire to learn kind of the mechanics, if you will, of technology.
Always.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is all clear to me now.
When I was 8 years old, I got a Commodore 64, and my dad told me, there's one rule. You have to write a program every week or you can't play games on it.
Wow.
So I had to figure out how to write in BASIC, and I'm not some great programmer, but it made me at least think about, what does technology do? How do computers work? What is possible? And always be questioning, what can I make this thing do?
So you've seen I don't know if the birth is the right word, but call it the early days and scale of the internet. And how it's just changed the world, business models, everything.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, my whole life has been about imagining what the internet unlocks for us.
So if you think about it, talking about the plumber and the electrician, you took a skill set, if you will, internet, digital programming, I mean, that's a skill set, and you turned it into a business.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I found a partner, in Jackie, who could bring all the technical genius side.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever told you about my first business. It was a tech startup. And it crashed and burned because I couldn't even spell PHP or computer server. I had to hire a front-end UI developer, back-end software team, and it was the biggest eye-opening experience of my life.
I can imagine.
That's a whole nother story.
I can imagine. I mean, I had the luxury of having a partner who was the developer. So anytime I had a business idea, I could say, Jackie, can you build this? She'd go, uh-huh. Great.
How have you had to, let's take the past, call it decade, 5 years in 1 year, then how did you have to morph with the times as social comes more prevalent, different business models rise? What's been some big changes you've seen?
Well, I mean, God, that's a lot of stuff, right? Everything has changed. Some people even say, our blog's still relevant, our website's still relevant. I mean, that's how fast things are changing. It's to the point now where you can build an entire business on just social media. You don't even need the infrastructure necessarily for a lot of opportunity that's out there.
Become an influencer.
Well, sure, an influencer, but you can develop product and sell it, right? You can promote it on Kickstarter and then take your Kickstarter campaign and promote it on social media, put up a YouTube video, and then you need a one-page purchase spot, and that's it. I mean, there's so many ways now that you can build opportunity and entrepreneurship online without even being a coder or
right, well, I was listening to this podcast a week ago, and I was talking about how the internet combined with this or a cell phone overlaid has created these networks and these opportunities, like you said, did not exist 5, 10, 20 years ago.
Your phone is the single greatest tool you have for making money that exists. You and a cell phone can make money.
But it's also extremely difficult, time-consuming. You got to know what you're doing. A lot of trial and error, a lot of sticking through it to really make a real go at it.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. I mean, you need commitment, you need a vision, you need training and mentorship. You need to find people who are already good at it and figure out how they're good at it. But, I guess for me, coming from an entrepreneur mindset, I just view everything as you can make excuses or you can just go get it done. The resources are all out there. To me, there are no excuses for not getting it done. If you're not getting it done, it's because you're not making the effort.
Mm-hmm. So, what has the last 3 years brought you? What's been keeping you busy the past, call it recent history?
Cryptocurrency has been the huge pivot. I mean, I've always been exposed to it since the day Bitcoin launched in 2009, but it's really consumed my life for the most part. in the last couple of years.
So where do you remember when you first heard about crypto, Bitcoin back in 2009? What were your initial kind of knee-jerk reaction thoughts to it?
The first time I read about Bitcoin, I thought, this is amazing. Amazing. I hope this takes off. I don't know how long it would take to take off, but I love the entire premise of Bitcoin. I think that it's elegant in its simplicity, and it's proven to be, I mean, I say simplicity, but ultimately when you get through the noise of technology, the premise of it and why it works is simple.
And I'm going to jump ahead, but I'm going to jump ahead, then we'll rewind. But you said when you ignore the premise of technology, one of the things that I was stuck on before I started really paying attention was it's hard, at least for me, it was hard to ignore the premise of technology because in essence, we're digitizing, bringing technology to currency somewhat to a certain level. So I got stuck on the technology because I couldn't understand it.
But isn't almost all of our transactions now digital? I mean, how much do you do in cash versus digital? I mean,
that's true, but I guess I was saying like, okay, I have a dollar bill in my pocket. I could feel it, touch it. I could go to the bank ATM, pull out a dollar. I just didn't because everybody was like, blockchain, AI, and I couldn't fully grasp what that all meant. But
I can go to a Bitcoin ATM and get cash.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
I think that that's why I say, yes, to some people it matters the technology, but at the end of the day right now, most of our money is in ones and zeros anyway. We're just calling them dollars.
And backed by who, which we'll get into. But before we get into Bitcoin, and we were talking earlier, and I shared this, my personal experience, and I read the book called The Bitcoin Standard, and it didn't even start to talk about Bitcoin until the later chapters in the book. And what sealed the deal, at least from okay, now I get it, is it talked about monetary theory, economic theory, what is money backed by, history of money a little bit. So let's start there because I think that's a good, starting point. I mean, briefly talk to me then about government, centralized currency backing. I mean, I know that's a wide picture, but you're good at this, man. Start somewhere and break this down.
Sure. So I guess you start at the beginning of what is money, right? Why do we even have money? All that currency represents is an easier way to facilitate exchange of goods and services, right? Before money, we would have to barter and we'd have to say, hey, can I have the eggs from your chicken and I'll come mow your lawn in exchange, right? And you'd have to individually find an exchange value, and what if I don't want the thing you're offering? So currency exists to be this constant mediating point.
That also a group of people agree upon, so there is that exchange of value.
Right, because if I give you $1 for something, somebody else has to agree to receive that $1 for their service, right? But why would I take that paper, right? Why would I receive it? What's going to incentivize me to do that? Well, in history, the reason we had things like a gold standard was people would only agree to receive that paper if it represented something they put value on, that they could exchange it for at least the guarantee of something that they would value.
So our initial currency, let's talk about, and we're going back to like the 20s, 30s?
I'm going all the way back into Rome, and so,
let's talk about this gold standard real quick.
Sure.
So this is saying like, okay, talk about the dollar. The U.S., we have this currency, it's backed by gold. Gold is this, metal, this thing we perceive as having value. We're going to put a dollar figure to that, then we're going to tie that to the currency, and then the currency is backed by this gold. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the accepted on an international level. Yeah.
I mean, all of the European, for the most part, most major currencies were backed by gold up to a certain point in time. And why? I mean, that gives them all an equal playing field, right? That means that everyone can understand these national currencies represent some physical object that I can exchange for that has value to it. So when you say I'm giving you this note, it's an IOU for this gold. Right? Now, why did we get rid of it? We got rid of it because it was inconvenient for the government.
To just have all that gold on hand?
No, it's inconvenient. The restriction on money supply. You can't issue more money if it's not backed by gold, if you have a gold standard. So what happens if you need to spend more money than you have gold?
So say that one more time, because I think this is absolutely critical, and this has helped me in my understanding. We got rid of it because of money supply, and it wasn't easy to just issue more money.
Right. You couldn't just issue more money if you didn't have gold to back it up.
To print more money, to put it into circulation.
Right. It's just like you have this war chest of gold, and these are paper notes that represent a piece of it. If I don't have more gold added in, I can't write more notes out on it. Right? And if the government says, but we need to spend more money.
Is there a positive to that, though, that you can't just print more money?
Of course there is. Well, number one, okay, let me ask you this. As a person, when you're young, you're taught to budget your money. You're taught that you can't spend money you don't have, right? You have to have a plan. You have to have constraints. You have to consider what you're willing to prioritize to spend on. Today, even our states are expected to have balanced budgets. But for some reason, our federal government doesn't have to have one, right? They can just print and print and print. We even just had the government say in the last couple of weeks, don't worry about us defaulting. We can't default because we can print as much as we need. Okay, then what does it mean? If you can think about for you, if you need more money, you have to go earn it. Every dollar you have represents time and effort. It's an actual representation of the value of your time and effort.
Sure.
And it's the same thing when you purchase a good, or you sell a good. That good was from your time and effort. And that's what an economy is, this exchange of time and effort. But if the government can just print more without time or effort associated to it,
What value does that have anymore?
it has no value, and it devalues your time and effort.
Well, it has value in essence, maybe because we the people, still believe in it or have faith in it, or maybe don't have another option. I don't know, thinking out loud. But so we go from this gold standard, like 1930s or whatever it was.
No, I think we went off in the like 74 or something.
Oh, I was after World War II when it came up then, so I'm confused. So in the 70s, they said, okay, we're no longer going to go on this gold standard. We're going to go to the Fiat standard.
Yeah, we're
right?
just fiat, yeah.
Which is
unbacked.
just backed by the good faith of the American government.
Which means what?
Which means they can just print money as is.
But what is that? What can I exchange for? I hand it and say, hey, kudos. I mean, it's not exchangeable for anything except that you'll agree to receive it.
And then this is my progression on this whole Bitcoin crypto of the printing money and what does scarcity mean? How does scarcity come into play to currency value? I read a stat, 30 to 40% of the money in circulation today, at least in the States, has been created in the past 18 months.
Right. So on average for a decade, we were increasing at about 7% a year. And then in the last 18 months, we went up, 20%. So now if you think about it, you're increasing the supply of money by that much, right? But the only way you don't have inflation is if you have more goods and services available at the same rate. But what happened in the last couple of years, people actually saved more than they had saved in 30 years because there was a lot of things that you couldn't go spend on, right? You couldn't travel, you couldn't do a lot of things that you would normally spend disposable income on. So the wealthy saved at a rate of like 32% during this time period. So you
and what time period is this?
In the last 18 months.
Okay.
Right? We went from normally saving, about 4% to saving like 30% because they didn't have anything to spend that money on. Now people at the lower end of the spectrum, they didn't really save much more because their basic needs didn't change, right? And that's where all their money goes, just survival. So what happened? Our inflation rate in the last year was like 5.5%. Our Fed target's 2%. But even then you say, okay, well, how can we increase money supply 20% but only have inflation of 5%? The only reason that happens is because we're the United States government. And the whole world needs our dollar to be stable. The fact is the US dollar is this house of cards. It's a fiction. It's a lie because the only reason we have the value we have as stable as it is because anytime we try to change the value of the dollar, the rest of the world intervenes because the entire world economy is revolving around this dollar.
Right.
So nobody can afford to let it crash. So we artificially prop its value.
And I'm extremely late to the game. I just started kind of getting into the crypto scene and just kind of really paying attention to it in the past year. But it hit me last year when the government was sending out all these stimulus checks, all this money for businesses, all this everything. I mean, I don't know if it's trillions. It's definitely got to be billions, but trillions in stimulus money. And I thought to myself, where the heck is this coming from? Like this, I mean, literally we're day one, and then it's almost like, you just punch some numbers into a computer. Now we're on day 2 and we have $1 trillion more just out there. I mean, that's got to come from somewhere. Where does that come from? It's got to be backed by. That's what triggered me to start going down this rabbit hole the past year and a half.
No, it's all a game. I mean, you think about how fake it is and how much this is a house of cards. When we had the economic crisis in 2008, 2009, and what should have happened is we should have basically all really suffered. We should have all had to cut spending. We should have all had to give up a bunch of things. We should have had a fiscal reset. But we can't, because our entire economic system depends on the usage of credit and constant consumption. Why? Because if we all stop buying the new iPhone and we decide, hey, I don't need it for the next 5 years because I just lost all the value in my house, then what happens to the Apple stock? Now that means what happens to your 401k and your ETFs and your IRAs, right? There's this whole ripple effect. Well, we can't let that happen.
Interesting.
So we got to keep up the lie. We need to give you stimulus so you'll go buy the new iPhone so that we can keep this chain going. It's totally unsustainable over time. And to me, it's a lie. The whole thing is just this fictitious lie of keep getting Americans to spend. That's why when they give you a stimulus, they don't want you to save it as a safety net. They want you to go spend it immediately.
Put it back in the economy.
Right, it has to go back in. That's why stocks kept going up while people were out of jobs. Nobody was going to work, but yet stocks kept going up. Why? Because
they were getting the stimulus check and putting it at a GameStop.
Right, exactly. They were loading into the Robinhood account.
Here's my $900 check. There you go.
I mean, look at how much Robinhood did during that time period when everybody was at home. They had nothing else to do, so they sat around trading meme stocks and.
Do you think the average person understands this?
No. Look, here's something that I think about a lot. We spend all this time teaching our kids history and how atoms work, and so many things that they're not going to.
What's a proton and a neutron?
Right. We don't teach them how money works. We don't prepare people to become adults and know how to manage money, how to grow money, how to build wealth at all. Any more kids go to college, they don't even know how to balance a checkbook. They don't even know what a checkbook is.
Right.
They don't even know how to reconcile a bank statement.
Right.
I mean, what do you do with that? I don't even know where to go from there.
Yeah. No, I admit I didn't learn that stuff until way after the Army, until I started making a little bit of money. Then it hit me like I better figure out with a quickness what the hell I'm doing personally. Personal finance even related. So how then, what's the premise of Bitcoin at a high level? And then let's step by step drill down to more, but from a high level, how does Bitcoin play into this? We talked about monetary theory, what a currency is backed by, just printing more of it, which devalues it, scarcity. What does that all mean as it relates to Bitcoin?
Sure. So, Bitcoin has a bunch of things going for it, right? It does have a fixed supply, and it's unchangeable. One of the most attractive things about Bitcoin is that it is not controlled by any institution, business, government. It is uncorruptible.
So we're going to get into that. Talk to me about fixed supply, because that goes into this theory of scarcity.
Sure.
Right? What does that mean exactly for people that may not know? Because I'll be honest, I heard that from my good friend, Ryan Johnson, huge Bitcoin supporter. He told me for a very long time, every single day, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. There's only so many of them. There's 21 million coins can only be made or minted or mined. And I never fully got that until about last year, what that meant.
So there will only ever be 21 million, and they don't all exist yet, right? So they have a minting schedule, and we can get into the details of that, but it will take, 98% of it will be in supply by 2030, and the last 2% will take over 100 years to be produced. So it'll be like 2140 something is when all of the Bitcoin finally exists.
21, wow, okay.
Yeah, so This is a long game, right? This is not an overnight thing.
And I do want to find out why that is, how you know that, but go on.
So now, of those 21 million, many have already been lost. It's as if they got burned in a fireplace, right, if they were dollars. Because in the beginning of Bitcoin, nobody knew it would be worth anything. And so people have lost the hard drives they had it on. They've forgotten their codes.
And those will never come back, period, end of discussion.
No, because
they're gone.
They exist. They're in a digital wallet, but nobody has the key to it.
Interesting.
It's like a safe deposit box nobody can open, right?
Okay.
So they exist, but they're not retrievable.
Got it.
So the supply is actually going to be less than that.
And why does scarcity matter?
Scarcity matters because when you don't change the quantity of something, you can assign value to it reliably, right? You know there's only so much of it, and you know that it's exchangeable. And the more demand there is for it, the price can go up, right? And nobody can just make more to devalue what you already had. So, that's the problem with regular fiat currency is if the government has to print a whole bunch, it devalues all of what exists already.
Like if you're super hungry and I have a sandwich, you'll pay a lot for it. But if I have a million sandwiches, you can't buy all of them. And what are you going to do with that?
Right, yeah. There's definitely a supply and demand piece to it. And so, of course, the price of Bitcoin would be reliant on the demand for it. But the fixed supply gives you that value of scarcity, and it also gives you security and comfort in knowing that it can't be inflated away.
Okay, so we've got the scarcity aspect. Now talk to me a little bit about then the technology aspect of, like you said, it's going to take, 98% will be created by 2030, or then the last 2%, 100 plus years. What does that mean, and why is that?
So Bitcoin works on something called proof of work. And this goes back to the concept I mentioned earlier about time and effort, right? And that the money you have and your purchasing power is tied to your time and effort. And so to produce a Bitcoin requires this concept of time and effort or work.
And these are these Bitcoin miners, they call them.
Right. So these computers, they're just computers, right? But they're specially designed for mining Bitcoin. And it just involves solving a cryptographic function. And it's a race. So it's not that the computer actually created the Bitcoin. It's that in order to control the release of supply, it says, hey, you have to make this effort to get this Bitcoin
So
to come
this is
into
a
existence.
this is a math problem per se?
It's not even a problem.
Or
it's
a math equation that has to be solved?
It's a guess is what it is, actually. So what it is there's this hexadecimal number, and then there's all these machines trying to guess this number or close to it, right? And
That's crazy.
Whoever guesses closest but below it receives this next batch of Bitcoin.
That's nuts.
It is, and it sounds silly, right? But is it any sillier than turning on a machine and just printing $1? No, this is still a printing process, but...
And is each coin a different number they have to guess?
So each block
Or each
that's
block,
processed, yeah. So each block in the blockchain has an individual identity, right? And every transaction has an identity, and a block is made up of a bunch of transactions. So, but the proof of work means that in order to create this Bitcoin and receive it, you had to have provided this value to the network.
Got it.
Right, and to change, and this is also what gives it security, because the way it works is all these machines that are running Bitcoin and running the ledger have to agree on any change and to validate transactions. So when you and I make a transaction, it's not just you and I saying we made the transaction and telling the system. All these people have to say, yes, we all agree that Bitcoin moved from him to him, and now it resides here.
What are they actually verifying? That I sent it and you accepted it?
Right. And so one person can't change it, right? So you could apply this idea to like not being able to change the accounting of a business or something else, right? It becomes what we call immutable. In order for that record to change, more than 51% of all the miners would have to agree to change it.
Interesting.
And that would be
a lot of work.
Well, not only work, but it'd be expensive. So if I wanted to corrupt the Bitcoin blockchain, I would have to spend enough money and resources to overtake over half the network.
Interesting.
So it's this massive barrier to modification and corruption.
So is this going into the concept then of decentralization?
Yes, absolutely.
And what does that mean?
So decentralization means that it's not controlled by any one or small group, right? So you imagine when somebody says, "Oh, we're going to ban Bitcoin." How? You can't turn it off unless you turn off the entire internet.
Can countries ban it?
They could say it's illegal for you to use it, but they can't really stop it from existing or from you finding a way to acquire it. They can't go to a company and turn it off, right? They can't call up Amazon and say you're out, because it's made up of computers by hundreds of thousands of people all around the world.
On their own servers.
In different jurisdictions, right? And there's no one you can call, there's no one you can sue, there's no switch you can flip. You can't. I mean, you would have to overtake all of Bitcoin yourself. You'd have to spend those resources.
So Bitcoin, two-part question. One, this is now this blockchain technology. I mean, this is the fastest adopted form of technology ever?
Yeah.
This has just grown at light speed. I mean, maybe the internet, then cell phone is second and third, but how has this grown so fast?
Well, I mean, so the infrastructure's laid, right? The internet had to be there.
Right.
And the computer processing power had to be there to be able to facilitate all these interconnected systems at such a high rate. But now that we have that underlying infrastructure, and Bitcoin took a while, to really start getting adopted. I mean, it came out in 2009, but only recently do people really seem to be taking it seriously, right? But now, as that foundation exists, what you're seeing is the innovation on top of that concept is happening exponentially.
On different platforms all over the place.
Right, because now everyone sees that they can't stop it, so they better get into it.
So Bitcoin, back to Bitcoin then, is this, we get, okay, the technology aspect that you just explained, but the average person, is this a store of value that they're wanting to buy and hold and hope this has value 10 years from now? Or what's bringing it back down to like the layman's terms, why would I buy Bitcoin today?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, the true use of Bitcoin specifically right now is store of value. It's digital gold, right? And it is the best performing asset in the last decade.
And it has value because people say it does because they're buying it?
Sure, like anything. Something only has value if somebody wants it.
Right.
Right? But gold has value. Gold has value because it's scarce. It does have utility, right? But it's cumbersome. It's big and
it's not a
heavy
payment method. Like I'm not shaving off gold to go buy a loaf of bread at the store.
Right. Anymore, that's not feasible. Bitcoin, in some ways, like Bitcoin could be great for big transactions, right? That are slow. It's not great to go to Starbucks and buy a coffee.
Are you seeing this on a global scale? People doing these transactions with Bitcoin? Trading, buying goods and services?
Sure. It has been for a long time. I mean, originally Bitcoin got a bad name because the people using it were using it for illicit things online a lot.
Criminals.
But that's only because it wasn't adopted anywhere else, right? The fact is now it is overwhelmingly used for normal, legal, functional things. But it is really a store of value. And the reason it's hard to use as a currency is because it's very volatile in its price.
But would you classify it as a currency?
I would classify Bitcoin as property.
As property.
As property. I mean, gold's not a currency. You could trade with it, but it's not currency.
Got it.
But things can be backed by it, right? So there are cryptographic currencies that are more like true currencies, and they're backed by a variety of things. And it is possible that there would be a more stable currency that is backed by Bitcoin.
So countries like, I think the first one is this El Salvador, just recently adopted Bitcoin as what?
It is legal tender now. So El Salvador uses the US dollar as its primary currency. They don't have their own currency. They just recently, this summer.
How long have they had the US dollar as their primary tender?
I don't know.
Okay.
But for
recently.
a significant
A couple years.
So they have a young president, and he's looking for innovation and change, and so they passed a law to say that as of now, Bitcoin is legal tender, which means any business that has the technological capability to, if you want to pay them in Bitcoin, they have to accept it as payment.
Wow.
Now, this is feasible through this layer on top of Bitcoin called the Lightning Network that facilitates faster transactions and things. But this is really interesting because we think about a lot countries in Latin and South America, and we think about corruption, we think about currency instabilities. We look at what happened to Venezuela, with hyperinflation. And to me, what's fascinating is that the country would actually move to a currency that they can't control. They can't inflate, they can't do anything to corrupt it. And maybe it's only because they were already using another country's fiat and not their own.
Could they at all affect the price of goods and services, or that has no bearing on, that has no bearing on Bitcoin, but if a loaf of bread is $1, now it's $3, could they do anything like that? As far as any forms of corruption or?
I suppose any government could say there's a fixed cost, or a regulated price on a good. But, honestly, the bigger risk is Bitcoin fluctuates a lot. How do you price a loaf of bread against something that's moving 5, 10, 15% up and down in a day? Right. Until that
So how are they doing that? I mean, is the cost of what Bitcoin is today is how they, I guess that's where I was going. How do they price their goods and services if Bitcoin is so volatile?
Right, so that's where it becomes difficult. That's where it becomes maybe it's a better store of value and wealth creation for their people, right? So they gave everybody who was willing to install the government's wallet $30 worth of Bitcoin. So all these people just received for free $30 worth of Bitcoin. So what if they just held that, right? I mean, I told you a story recently in my fantasy baseball league. Somebody wanted to pay their league dues in Bitcoin. In over 2 years, they paid about $100. 5 years later, I opened up that Bitcoin wallet, and that Bitcoin was now worth $10,000.
Jeez, so that goes back to your you mentioned this is the fastest growing asset?
It's the highest returning asset investment class in the last decade.
Wow.
Outpaces by far any stocks, So imagine if all these people of El Salvador had a $30 and they sat on it for 3 or 4 or 5 years. What would $10,000 do for that family in El Salvador? Just that small investment could suddenly change the economic situation of all these people, right?
Wow, it's a big deal.
Plus, you also have to remember that one of the powers of something like a Bitcoin or another digital currency is in some of these countries, a very high percentage of the population are unbanked. I mean, for example, in Colombia, 70% of people are unbanked. Once you get outside of the cities, it's a very, very low banking rate. So you have to facilitate some way for transactions to take place. And cash exists, and it's one way to do it, but it's limiting, right? So moving to digital currencies, because everybody's got cell phones, it's basically like you're taking your bank with you, right? And you don't need an intermediary. It's just peer-to-peer.
And it's backed on, like you said, this system that cannot change, cannot be corrupted.
Right.
So does this also kind of level the playing field? I heard a statistic the other day, I don't know if it's true, 42% of Americans don't have an investable asset, a stock, a bond, or whatever. Does this kind of help maybe get people into an investable asset, a store of value, something that could benefit them in the long run?
I don't know about that because, so all these Americans who have no investable asset, the question is why don't they have one? Is it because they don't have money to put in one, because they don't have information? Well, they would still have to get information to know how to use cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, just like they would have to get information on how to put $10 a week into Robinhood, right? The only difference that I would see is that you don't need anybody's permission to buy and sell and have access to cryptocurrency. You don't need to apply with anybody to put a digital wallet on your phone and receive and send cryptocurrency. It's just your right to do so, right? But you could go to JP Morgan or Robinhood or any of these places and they could say, no, we're not going to give you a trading account.
Right.
No, we won't open a bank account for you. You actually need permission to participate in those systems.
Would you say, back to your kind of time is kind of torn, would you say most of your time is on crypto these days?
Yes, yeah, by overwhelmingly, because there's unlimited potential in cryptocurrency and blockchain, not only from investments, but in new business opportunities.
So when did you see that and go all in, and then what exactly are you doing in this space?
Well, I went all in the last 2 years.
Define all in.
90% of all of my effort is spent in the space.
Wow. And personal money, I assume, is in this. Not to get too personal, but
I don't have a single stock. I only have crypto and real estate.
Wow.
Because for me, why would I put my money in anything else when nothing can perform at the rate of return?
Is this also part of, back to the conversation, like a lifestyle choice, a freedom choice you want?
There's a huge freedom component to it. As an entrepreneur, and maybe, I don't know if I'm this way because I'm an entrepreneur or I'm an entrepreneur because I think this way, but I think from the viewpoint of what is freedom and what does that look like? And okay, I'm a US citizen, I'm a global citizen, I'm a human being. What rights are intrinsically mine? What rights are given to me by government? Which rights should be able to be given to me or not? And one of the things is, I don't think that enterprises and government should be able to tell me how I can spend my money, when I can spend my money, or where I can take my money. Right now, your bank can decide they don't want to do a transaction that you want to make because they don't like the transaction.
Sure.
But it's your money.
Right.
Why do they have the right to tell you what you can spend your money on? Why do they have the right to tell you how much per day you can spend of your money? You're supposed to be the customer. And yet you almost have to beg for permission to utilize the money you earned. And to me, that's wrong.
So that's one of the reasons you went all in.
That's one of the things that I love about cryptocurrency.
So what's taking up 90% of your time in this space?
Education, constant education. Me being educated, not educating others. It's moving so fast, and there is so much innovation happening.
Is the technology around it and other opportunities that's moving so fast? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, so, I mean, once you get past Bitcoin, right, there are, well, I mean, I don't even know how many thousands now, because it changes every day, but in 2017, there was like 1,000 different cryptocurrency or blockchain tokens.
Each with their own kind of spin on it?
Yeah, whether it's a utility, it's a currency, it's, it's a governance. I mean, there's so many things that it's used for now. Now there's not just Bitcoin. In 2017, there's Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now there's like probably 20 what we call layer 1 blockchains. And on top of those are whole ecosystems of businesses and use cases and problems being solved.
Yeah, I put in $100 into that. What's the one that begins with an S, SH, or SI? Do you know what I'm talking about?
SI, no.
SH?
SHIB?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Anyways,
No,
I could be embarrassed. That's fine.
I mean, there's actually a lot.
I rolled the dice.
I was in SHIB when it first launched.
Yeah, I came in late as usual.
There's just so many things. There's so many opportunities. And honestly, I mean, anybody who's young right now, what they should be learning is blockchain.
Just the technology behind it, what it
How
means?
do blockchains work? What languages are used to code in them? How they interoperate? How they interconnect? Because that's going to be where all the wealth building and growth is going to come.
And other business models are going to come off this blockchain technology.
Right.
And this idea of something, it can't be manipulated. There has to be a verification system for transactions to take place. It's secure.
Right.
Interesting.
I mean, there are a lot of use cases for blockchain technology, and blockchain gets into this whole idea of immutable record, right? So if you think about
record.
It's a record-keeping system. It's a giant distributed database, except that nobody can overwrite it without the whole group agreeing to overwrite it.
Because there's rules that you have to have the majority agree to overwrite it, like you said.
You can add new things, but you can't change the things that are there easily.
The foundation of it.
Right. Or you can't censor. It's censorship resistant, right?
Give me one example of blockchain outside of maybe crypto and currency.
So Ethereum is the second largest one, and Ethereum is, we call it the oil to Bitcoin's gold, right? It's the oil it's the machine that's powering most of the blockchain world right now, and most of the applications have been built on it. It's a giant language and infrastructure to power blockchain-based applications.
Interesting.
And on top of that are built all kinds of things, financial products, games, digital art,
the
currencies.
NFT thing.
NFTs are mostly, NFTs are now on all major blockchains, but most of the ones that you've heard of are built on Ethereum. Ethereum has this massive adoption. It's overwhelmingly receives most of the new projects that are in blockchain. But there are many competitors now, especially in the last year, that have really started to catch ground. And there's going to be room for all of them. There's not just going to be one winner because there's just too much demand. There's so much demand for adoption that these distributed systems are actually getting bogged down already by the demand to utilize them. We just had
That's got to wake you up and make you pay attention.
Yeah, it's unstoppable. It's going and it's going and it's going at a rate that you can't even fathom in another 5 years.
Who is trying to stop this? Who's against this?
Nobody's against blockchain.
Or just maybe Bitcoin. Are governments against this?
Some are, and some aren't, right? So we see like El Salvador, and after El Salvador's move, Panama, Nicaragua, Colombia, a whole bunch of countries are actually investigating doing similar things and trying to decide if it's a move they should make. On the other side, you see China banning Bitcoin.
They want more control.
Right, so why doesn't China like it? China doesn't like it because they can't control it, right? They can't control the information that's on it. They can't control how the money moves. They can't see necessarily everything you do, and they want to know everything their citizens do. They're not anti-blockchain. They're going to release their own that they control.
This just made me think then. So if you have a government that's using, El Salvador, is the government somehow taxing any of those transactions?
Well, not directly on the chain, they can't.
Right.
But it's just like in the United States, you are required to report your business activity, your crypto gains, right? It's not immune from taxation. And so whether or not the government believes that you've reported it all or not is just like anything else. So it's just like using cash. I mean,
right, the honor system.
Sure. I mean, think about the tip economy, right?
Sure.
Like the government has that same struggle of knowing how much you've actually earned. So places like China, they don't like it. There was a couple years ago, a member of our Congress who said on C-SPAN, so it's on YouTube, you can find it, and he said that he implored all of his peers to ban Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, not because they were bad for humanity, because they were bad for the business of the US dollar. And his excuse was, well, imagine how are we going to sanction Iran if their oil doesn't have to get paid through US dollars and cleared through our systems? So again, this goes back to the dollar is now weaponized, right? The dollar is not just currency. Right. It is how the U.S. government controls the world.
Well, just like anything, like people say the early adopters of the internet, you said, internet enabled criminals to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, you're always going to have that spectrum of people that say one way or another.
I mean, everything can be used for good or bad.
Right.
Right? And that doesn't stop innovation. It doesn't stop moving forward.
So are you then, back to your 90% time, are you just, is day trading a thing when it comes to crypto? Are you just moving money daily to track trends, or what is it? What do you do?
Yeah, so it's split up. Some of it's day trading, some of it's long-term investing, some of it is getting into brand new projects, like the equivalent of getting into a stock in a company before it's on the stock market, right? Like, pre-IPO. All those same kind of concepts exist. There's yield generation, so you can invest in things that pay off the equivalent of something like a dividend, right? But they're not dividends in the crypto space. So there's a lot of ways that you can be involved in cryptocurrency and generate income. And it really depends on what your need is from it, what your time horizon is. Is it something you're going to sit on? Like you buy Bitcoin and you put it in your IRA and you wait till you're retiring. At the rate it's growing, oh my God, what could your retirement look like? I mean, there are people already speculating that Bitcoin is going to be 100,000 to 200,000 by the end of this year, 400,000 next year, and it's going to be over $1 million in the next 5 years. So
that's crazy.
I mean, imagine if you're not late, like it's $40,000 right now. There are some people who say the book value today is 100,000, that it's already at a 50% discount from its actual book value because of manipulation, in the market.
So, and I asked you this before, and this pure just curiosity. So I have Coinbase. Is that considered my digital wallet?
Well, Coinbase is an exchange.
But that's where I host, host, that's where I hold my perceived value of the money I have in Bitcoin. So real quick then, what's the difference between Coinbase and like a digital wallet?
So Coinbase is what you call a custodial wallet, meaning they have control of your keys.
Okay.
Keys is like, they're your digital keys, your cryptographic keys, but imagine they hold the keys to your safe deposit box.
Okay.
Right? So if they don't want to give you access to your money, just like the bank, they can deny you access to your money.
Okay.
In Bitcoin, there's a saying, not your keys, not your coin. So for real sovereignty and real control, you want to have your own wallet that you keep those tokens. It's like the wallet that's in your pocket.
Digital wallet they talk about.
Right. That's the difference between the wallet in your pocket and the wallet, your account at your bank.
So where would one go to set up a digital wallet? Just another service that's out there, another app, another...
Yeah, so there are apps you can have on your phone. There are hardware wallets that you can install.
Can you buy the Bitcoin there? You have to buy it through a Coinbase or an exchange and then transfer it to your digital wallet.
You have to buy it from someone. It could be a person that already has it. Your friend could have Bitcoin and send it to you. You could give him cash and buy a Bitcoin.
But like these wallets, these digital wallets, you don't buy it from the wallet. That's just where you store it. Like you said, your key, your wallet.
This is also what is a little bit interesting is your wallet is just a view into the blockchain. Your money's actually on a blockchain. It's on all those computers all around the world.
Right.
Where there's a record that says this ID owns this Bitcoin.
And that's your ID, right?
And you're just known by this ID on the chain.
Okay.
Now, your wallet is one way for you to view your balance and to interact with your balance. You're giving it permission to say, I can move this money, I can receive money, I can see the balance of it. Right? So I can have that same wallet on 4 phones in my computer if I want, and from all those places, I can see what's there, I can move the money, I can spend it. Because it's just a viewport, really, for it. What's important at the end of the day, though, is that you control the keys to your crypto money. Because if you don't, it can be taken from you.
So you're saying don't keep it on Coinbase?
Not a high percentage. For everybody, it's a different thing. Like if you are going to be trading, it's convenient to keep it there.
Got it. I'm with you.
But if it's the money you're going to hold for the next, several years, get it off the exchange. Exchanges, some exchanges are insured, some aren't. Coinbase, thankfully, is a U.S. registered publicly traded company, so you have more security with Coinbase. There are other exchanges, they can get hacked, you lose your money, and there's no insurance, and it's gone.
Jeez. But it's hard to hack your wallet if you have it on your digital wallet.
It's hard to hack it as long as you take the right precautions, right? People get stolen from all the time because people are hackable. You yourself are hackable, right?
But the technology itself is pretty...
The technology is fine. The way people lose their Bitcoin is when somebody convinces you to give them your keys. Oh, I'm here from customer support. I just need this information so that I can do this thing for you.
Yeah.
And then your money's gone.
So, again, pure curiosity. I log into Coinbase. I see today Bitcoin's at 48,295. Then tomorrow it's at 40,000. The next day it's at 50,000. Then it's back down to 41,000. What's causing this? What system updates this, and what triggers cause this to fluctuate?
It's like any market, right? So, Bitcoin's being traded all around the world in very high volume. But it's volatile because, well, let's be honest, even just like stocks, it's manipulated. There are big players who are manipulating the price right now pretty aggressively.
We've seen that, yeah.
But it's just daily volatility. Like, it's only a few percent on most days. Like, it's the rare day when you're going to see a 10% move in Bitcoin in either direction. There's usually a trigger for it, but even when it happens now, you see the next day it bounces right back. So if you look on a longer time horizon, if you zoom out, it's nothing but up. It has dips. Bitcoin is known to go way up and then dip 40%. And then climb way up. But even after that 40% dip, it's higher than it was 6 months ago.
What system is causing that? Are there people behind a computer somewhere putting in numbers that impact that fluctuation, or how does it work?
Well, the trading's all automated. The trading itself isn't, but the pricing is, right? So you have depends on the exchange. Some exchanges use algorithms that move the price based off of how much supply and
Got it.
Buy and sell pressure there is. Some, it's an order book where you just put it up and say, I'm willing to buy or sell at this price, and people fill it or they don't, right? And so that's just the supply and demand of me saying, here's what I'm willing to pay. Where you get into manipulation is when you see people with significant amounts of money making a move, or people manipulating so you and I are the retail investor, okay? We are the people who have smaller amounts of money, who maybe are more likely to trade on emotion and less on fundamentals. And so what you'll see happen is, for example, here's an indicator. Oh, some big wallet just moved a bunch of money from their personal wallet into Coinbase. Why would they do that? They must be getting ready to sell. Oh no, this huge amount of selling is going to happen. I better sell first before the price goes down. They just tricked you into selling. Mm-hmm. You dropped the price for them so they could buy more at a cheaper price. They didn't even sell those coins they moved, right?
Sure.
But they signaled they might.
Yeah.
So you see these kinds of things happen. And it's happened a lot in the last year, because what you're seeing now is we've had unprecedented institutional adoption, but those institutions want to buy at a certain price. So they do everything they can to get the price driven down there.
That's why I know I'm not smart enough to analyze that. I just dollar cost average it. I put in X amount per month. I don't even look at it. It's auto draft into Coinbase, and that's what I got.
That's the best thing you can do.
So, wrap this up in the sense that, somebody just getting into this, what are like you said, start with understanding a little bit about what the blockchain means and that technology, and then what would be some of your best advice for somebody just kind of now really looking at this?
Yeah, if you're brand new, the best thing you can do is get that Coinbase account, if you're a US citizen, and do what you're doing. Dollar cost averaging, and just start with Bitcoin and Ethereum. Those two things. And don't get lost in the noise of the thousands of tokens that are out there, the thousands of projects that are happening. Then pick something and start to learn.
And disclaimer, everybody has their own risk tolerance. You know, we're not saying cash your next paycheck and dump 100% into Bitcoin. I mean, look at where you're at in life with risk you have and your tolerance and your appetite.
Yeah, and just because I'm all in on crypto doesn't mean other people should be. What I would say to people starting out is allocate like 5% of your investable into it, right? Keep the rest where you're comfortable in stocks and things like that. But get some exposure because it's not going away.
Yeah.
It's not going away, and it's going to keep going up. And, you know, if you're like my age or your age, it's going to be integral into the life of our children. So it's good to just at least learn and understand what it is, because it will be.
I like that.
It'll be like the cell phone. It'll be ubiquitous. It'll be everywhere.
Look, I have an 8-year-old son. I wonder where it's going to be at when he's graduating college or he's starting his life as a young adult, where Bitcoin and crypto is going to be. Very interesting perspective.
I mean, it's taking over everything. NFTs, play to earn gaming, you know, it's touching every aspect of life. It's touching everything from the record keeping for real estate to how video games function, all of it.
Well, this has been eye-opening for me. I mean, this is just the currency aspect of this, the money aspect of it, the technology overlaid on top of it, how it's changing. It can no longer be ignored. I think that's a fact. We're going to have a lot more from you. We can find you on our blog, thedavidjohnsonshow.com. Guest author. You're going to be contributing a lot in the months and years to come, I hope.
Absolutely.
I hope this is the start of something great. And again, this was just our first kind of intro into this. I know a lot of people have been having questions around this. And then, like I said, we're going to produce a lot more on just finance, crypto, what it means, mindset, entrepreneurship, and happy to have you along for this ride.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.